area of pure mass known as asymptotic group theory. She has been working at Hawaii Pacific University as an assistant professor of mathematics since 2011. She's interested in innovative and active teaching and learning, including inquiry-based learning.
Okay, with that, thank you.
Okay, so I already see like the colleague people are really nice. But thank you so much for having me here. I'm like super excited about speaking at this conference, and I hope that what I'm going to talk to you about will be of interest to you. It's not really psychology, but I'm just going to talk to you about my experiences, like she said, over the last 5 years teaching math and how it's changed and what I see looking forward. So I was just thinking maybe like we could do a little icebreaker to start things off. So why don't you guys all shake hands with somebody sitting next to you?
What are you going to say?
Or behind you. Okay, yeah, and if you haven't done it yet, shake hands with somebody you didn't shake hands with before.
Oh. Hey.
Okay, great. So I noticed that there's 11 of us here in the classroom, and what I was wondering is, if everybody in here shook hands with everybody else, how many handshakes would there be total?
Ooh.
Let's think about it. So you might want to talk to one of those people you shook hands with, or you might want to think about it by yourself. So how many total handshakes would there be?
How many are here?
11. I didn't actually shake hands with anybody, but if I also did that. Yeah, so you can talk to somebody behind you. If you don't know, that's okay. Oh, now we have 12. How would that change the question? Is it like 22? I don't know. Would it be? I mean, one person.
Or is it a
But it's not counting repeatedly, right? Like how many consonants? Because you wouldn't count.
the odd number?
I don't know. I don't math.
Okay.
So anybody like pretty sure they have the wrong answer? How about you? What were you thinking?
Well, because it was 12,
Uh-huh.
I was thinking, what was it, 12 times 11? Because we said that you can't shake hands with yourself. What?
12 times 11 is fine for me. Anybody had a different idea?
2 people make one handshake.
Oh, yeah. But then 2
Oh.
hands. 2 hands.
So
I don't know. Oh, wait, maybe we don't have to have 2 hands. Everybody else, like, we shook both of their hands.
Yeah, so you might not want to double count because if you shake hands with her, she also shook hands with you, right?
So that
But then you could also shake your left hand or your right hand.
Yeah, you could, so that's going to change the question, right? Okay, so we don't necessarily have to solve the problem, but I kind of just want to show you like what I would like to do on a day in my math class is pose a question, you know, maybe call on somebody who was wrong to start us off because wrong answers are awesome and they teach you to make right answers, you know. So is it a little different than what you might do on the first day in your other math class? Maybe a little different, right? So that's just kind of like, you know, we don't really have time to solve the problem, but that's kind of just like to give you an idea of something hands-on that everybody can understand, because for the rest of the time I'm just going to stand here and talk, but that's not actually how I teach. I'm actually saying you shouldn't do that. Okay, so this is the outline of my lecture though. So basically like what I'm advocating for is inquiry-based learning. So first I should tell you what it is. I'm going to provide a little bit of research on its effectiveness, and then I'm just going to tell you about my experience, basically, like how I have implemented this and some of the experiences. So this might be more interesting for psychology people, like the student experience, my own experience as an instructor, and then resources. That's more like for people who want to teach math with IBL, so that might not be super relevant to those in the audience here. Okay, so basically, have you guys heard of this active learning before? How many people have heard of active learning? Some people, so especially the instructors, we talk about this a lot, right? Like basically, you know, there's this idea of active learning or passive learning, and we're like kind of hearing about the active learning, but you know, a lot of people, so actually this audience is a little different than I expected. If there was a lot of math professors in the audience, I think I would have to sell them a little bit more on this. Maybe students will be easier to sell, but basically, I also learned from the traditional method of lecture. I didn't get to learn from active learning, but it's something new, it's out there, and this is kind of how I got started. So even though, you know, I wasn't taught that way, so usually like whatever you experience, that's kind of like what you perpetuate, right? So how did I end up like breaking this cycle? One was when I was a grad student, I actually had to teach classes, and we had a center for teaching there. So that was really supportive for me, and that started, you know, me on my journey to change the way I did things. So I did a teaching certificate program there where we learned about active learning a little bit. And I also did a little research project about active learning. So it was mostly lecture, but I at least questioned, should the students be working in groups sometimes? You know, should the students be working individually sometimes? So that was my first baby step that I took away from doing lecture. Also, because I'm like a real math person, I was kind of interested in data-driven stuff. So because there's research that points to active learning as being more effective, I started to question, should I be doing this? Should other people be doing this? And then also, like, when I first got to HPU, my colleagues, especially Hung Lu, I don't know if you guys ever took a math class from him, but he actually helped me so much my first year. He shared his lesson plans with me. He came to my class all the time, and he would always say, I think you can make it a little more active. I think you can make it a little more active. So I said, okay, maybe I can do that, you know? So I was kind of interested in this, but basically, like, most math classes are taught with the lecture method. Have you guys ever taken a math class? Was it taught with the lecture method? You know what I mean by the lecture method? Teacher shows you all the stuff, they work out all the examples. So that's pretty common. A lot of you are nodding your head that you learn that way. Did you enjoy learning that way?
It's kind of the only thing I know for math. That's the only
Yeah.
way I was ever taught.
Okay. Do you
Well, I
like
guess-
math?
Well, no.
No.
I mean, I don't have a problem with it, but
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
that's fair, right? So
my,
I mean,
my dad was really good at math, so that's
Uh-huh.
why, I don't know.
yeah. So you're kind of like, that's what I know, right? I
Yeah.
didn't really like math that much, but it's okay, you know, it didn't harm me or anything like that. So yeah, like that's kind of like how math has always been taught. And you know, a lot of people actually hate math. Like you're okay with it, but not everybody is even like you're like, that's. So I think the idea with the lecture method is that it's still inquiry based, but I tell you everything I know, then you go home and you inquire by yourself and you figure it all out by yourself, you put it all into your own context, you solve all the problems by yourself. That's a lot of emphasis for yourself, right? But that's the way that lecture method is supposed to work. So it worked for me, and then it's kind of like all the math teachers are like, well, it worked for us, like, why wouldn't it work for those students? But I mean, we might have like a certain type of personality that is into really abstract thinking, or we might have like really, really good long time span of whatever listening, and so we're a little different than other people. So you know, you have to start to realize just because it worked for you doesn't mean it's the best, doesn't mean it would work for everybody, right? So I started to think about these things. But now a lot of math teachers are emphasizing other teaching methods. So one of those is this inquiry-based learning, which I'm going to tell you about. So this is from my mentor. This is his quote. I actually went to a math ed conference back in February, and I found out that there is no definition of inquiry-based learning. They're disagreeing on it. But I think it's one of those things like, you know it when you see it, right? It's different from a lecture. So basically, this is what he said. Students are deeply engaged in rich mathematics and have opportunities to collaborate and discuss ideas and solutions. So we're not giving you solve x plus 5 equals 2. That's not a rich problem, right? So that's like, I think a part of it is that you're working on something that's deep, and that's more like how mathematicians do mathematics. So it should be like a little bit more of an authentic process. So like I said, we don't even know what it is, but even what it is, it's very broad and varied. So I'm going to explain to you a little bit some of those implementations that are out there. But generally it's characterized by a student-centered learning experience. So instead of being instructor-centered, where I am like the center of the world, I know everything, I tell you everything I know, and it's all about me, right? But instead, like, it should be actually all about you guys. What are the students thinking? What do the students understand? You know, I should be more of just a coach or a facilitator, like helping you reach your goal. So this is the idea, is to switch the roles. So one of the characteristics would be normally the instructor doesn't lecture, like the most hardcore, they don't do it at all. Okay, so sometimes they might do it a little bit, like 10 minutes of class or something like that, but it should be very little. So sometimes it doesn't use a textbook at all. Sometimes, like it might use a textbook, but the most hardcore is no textbook, no internet, no talking to each other. You do it all on your own, okay? But like I said, there's different implementations. So this is kind of like where I want to talk to you about the history of it, like where did it come from? So kind of curious what you think about it. So this is like the birth of it was the Moore method. So we've all heard of the Moore method who do this. And so R.L. Moore was a mathematician who started doing this in 1911. Pretty long time ago, and yet it's only sort of starting to catch on now. But what he did was, very hardcore. So he was a professor at UT Austin, and that's where his method became popular in the 1920s. And even now, UT Austin is like super big for math education and for teaching and stuff like that. So this is kind of all because of him. But he would cherry pick the very best students and put them in a class together, which is kind of that's not really what we think of IBL as nowadays, because we believe all students are smart, right? And that's why we want to challenge them. But he was just I only want the very best students, and so he would only give them a couple of definitions and axioms, so the bare bones of math, and expect them to create everything else by themselves. So they have to prove everything. And they weren't allowed to talk to other students. There was no internet back then. They weren't allowed to read books. And then during the class time, they would present their work to each other. And only during the class time were they talking about this work. Okay, so it was very individual centric. So this is his quote: "The student is taught the best who's told the least." So would you guys like to learn the Moore method? No? So yeah.
Dr. Davis, so what was the thinking or rationale behind students not even relying on a text or a treatise or a book when trying to solve problems? Why? What's the reasoning behind that?
So I think the reasoning is you don't need it because you're smart enough to figure it out on your own, and when you do figure it out on your own, you understand it better than when somebody else tells you. So if you think about it, the lecture is the teacher is telling it to you, right? So even if it's an active lecture, this is what I did a lot of the time when I was teaching. I'll tell you how to do it, then I'll let you practice, right? But that's not the same as if you figure it out on your own, right? And you were talking about math being a struggle.
Yes.
We kind of think that struggle is a positive thing. You know, so it's if you're able to struggle through something and figure it out on your own, that's really good. And then in the modern day and age, well, actually, I've talked to Mike Erickson about this, because sometimes I also don't let students use textbooks, and it can be a little controversial. Sometimes they like it, but sometimes they're just oh man, we have to struggle so much, but I mean, in the end, when they do figure it out on their own, it's kind of if you know the answer is there, you're so tempted to go get it, unless it's just cut off, whereas if you would just think about it for a little bit, you could figure it out on your own. So I think that that's the rationale, but the problems have to be at the level that the student, it's a reach, but they're going to get there, right?
So I guess that's the challenge as an instructor, is to really give good problems that are okay.
Yeah, so that's part of it, right? Definitely, it has to be done in a really careful way. So this is the Moore method, like I said, this is back in the 1910s, 1920s. So now we have modified Moore method. Okay, so his method has been modified for use. So this is usually modified Moore method. It's still based on the Moore method. You get some kind of sparse handouts, right, that are ordered in a logical way, and they're sufficiently scaffolded, so you should be able to solve each problem. You should be able to go from one problem to the next by understanding how to solve the previous one. And the problems are really rich problems, and they support inquiry to the heart of the big mathematical ideas. So the job of the instructor then is to choose the right problems, and to ask them in the right order and things like that. And so the modification is also that, this is what I do. The students work a lot of the times in groups, not only by themselves, but I think students have a lot to learn from each other, right? So Moore would not let them talk to each other, but modified Moore method students might be working in groups, and students also might be working during class time, not just presentations, but they could be doing math and doing work during class. So usually, like I said, the solutions are discussed in class, and then another thing is the instructor is not there to say, your answer's right, your answer's wrong, sit down, no, I'm not really going to say anything. I'm just going to let a really long, awkward silence go over the class until somebody else says something I don't understand how you got that, or are you sure that's right? I think maybe if you did it this way, so pretty much the students are supposed to be responsible for determining whether the math is right or wrong. But of course, if they start to all get, off the rails, I'm going to step in, but that's not my job, is to tell them what's right and wrong. So So basically, like, yeah, this modified Moore method, it's more like deductive, so you kind of give the students all the definitions and then you ask them to prove the theorems from there. And then there's like a new kind of IVL as well, which is more inductive, where everything is kind of like an investigation. So I'll give you a problem, even a handshake problem, and like in the end, what I want you to figure out is some certain sum formula, right, that comes out of the handshake problem. But it's like you figure it out yourself through an example, and then I could formalize it and put it into a context. So yeah, so that's more like discovery based, like students need to discover the math, and then only afterwards the definition is formalized. So I've used both. There's also this thing called inquiry oriented, which is actually different from inquiry based, which the difference is that in addition to the students inquiring about the mathematics, the instructor is inquiring into student thinking, which I think should always be a part of good teaching. So to me, that's not like that much of a big deal. Like if you don't know what students are thinking, how can you really teach them? Okay, so do you guys have questions or comments so far? You can just jump in at any time if you do. Okay, are you getting a little picture of what's happening in the classroom? Yeah, okay, so Sandra Larson did a big scale research project on IVL effectiveness. She's not the only one. She's from UC Boulder, but she is kind of like the most famous one, she and her group, just because they have so much data. So they used a broad definition of IVL, so it could be anything from Moore's method to discovery based, and she let the instructors self-identify as IVL or non-IVL, although she like later tested basically by doing all these classroom observations to see like if she was right. Okay, so they were studying outcomes, skills, and attitudes in IVL classes at 4 major research schools. So they used a variety of methods, surveys. She went and sat in on classes, and she would literally write down, okay, now the student is doing a presentation, now they're doing a group work, now they're having whole class discussion. So she like did all these classroom observations, they did interviews, and they did tests. So here's just a few quotes about what they found. So they found that the benefits of active learning experiences may be lasting and significant for some student groups with no harm done to others. So like especially like underrepresented groups like females and minorities and students who usually get D and F in math were helped a lot by IVL. And then students who get an A, pretty much those guys are going to get an A no matter what you do, but this doesn't prevent them from getting an A. Okay, they're not doing any worse. So she said, importantly, covering less material in inquiry-based sections had no negative effect on students' later performance in the major. So one thing that I'll talk about a little bit more is, can you imagine that if you have to figure out everything on your own, it's going to take longer than if I just tell it to you, right? So that's a major concern that instructors have. Oh no, we won't cover as much material, but it's like, does it matter if they didn't understand what you were talking about, how much you said? You know, so she kind of found out, no, it doesn't matter. They do just as well in the following class, even if they covered less material and more depth. And the students were just as able to do computational things. It's not like, oh, they understood the concepts, but they couldn't compute anything. No, that's not true either. And she also found evidence for increased persistence among the high-achieving students. So that's kind of interesting. Those are the ones that the faculty members would like to recruit and retain. So those A students may actually be like improving their persistence in addition to getting their A. So the bottom line, it doesn't hurt and it can help. Okay, so like I said, there's a wealth of other research out there to suggest, so there's research that shows that you get like 5% out of a lecture. Like if I give you a lecture, oh sorry, and then at the end I give you a quiz, you'll probably get 5%. You know, that's not too good, right? So basically the active learning does better. So there's a lot of other research out there, but I just present this snapshot for you. So basically students who are learning and getting math are happy. These are the students in the class. They always make their little poster on the board. They visit the poster and put the sticky notes, sticky comments. So this is kind of like what the class looks like when I'm not there. I'm bored, I'm standing in the back somewhere. Okay, so yeah, so now I'll talk to you about kind of like my journey, how I learned to do this, because I only was taught with lecture, yeah.
You know, Dr. Davis, I have to say one thing that's just really striking me. You were at the talk yesterday by Dr. Almer, and she was talking about the Academically Adrift book, and one of the things it was suggesting is that students don't read enough and write enough, yeah? In some respects, you know, it almost seems to, there seems to be a contrast between what that book is saying and what the what you're proposing here, or what's been proposed by Moore, in that you don't have a text. It's not the idea that you read, if you read more, you're going to do better, which, you know, in part, that was one of the suggestions from Academically Adrift. What was your reaction when you heard the Academically Adrift recommendations about what students should be doing? And
I have like two reactions. So one is, what I learned is that math does not actually emphasize critical thinking in the way that it's defined in that book or in the way that it's defined at HPU, because in math there is only one right answer. There aren't multiple perspectives that all could be right. So I think that like it's just sort of different because what we're doing is writing proofs, right? We're not like constructing an argument that might be right or wrong. So I'm not too sure like how math fits into critical thinking, although I think that math students are very good at solving problems.
Okay.
So that's one, but what was the other thing I was going to say in response to you?
In terms of what they were what I was kind of
Yeah.
talking about was, what they were saying students need to do more. They need to, read more and write more.
Yeah. So, well, I'm going to talk about it a little bit more later. Yeah, I was like thinking about a lot of the things from her talk, but one is, students really like, oh gosh, if we do a lecture, we expect them to do like 3 hours of homework outside of the class, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they need to do that much homework if they're just doing math all the time in class. It's like, I think there's a better way to use the time so that they can learn it faster. Like, I don't know, I guess that's kind of how I was feeling
Interesting.
about
Okay,
it.
that's what I was getting. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah. She brought up some other things that I was thinking about too that I can't remember right now, but I'll tell you. Yeah, like as soon as she was talking about it, I started thinking about that stuff too. So like to get trained, I actually went to a workshop for like a week, and they gave us a lot of hands-on training. So actually they treated us like students, which I think is super important to feel what it feels like to be working on a problem that you don't know how to solve and talking to people that you don't know. It can be, actually like the first time I taught this way, I had a student come up to me after class and say like, I'm so uncomfortable in this class. And I was like, yeah, that's okay. I understand.
That's okay.
You won't be uncomfortable by the end, but it's kind of like you have to learn to deal with all these situations, and like I do know what it feels like actually, and we were also like shown this data, and we were also given course notes. So it's really hard to write your own notes, and so one thing that's nice is if somebody else wrote notes, you can modify them for your use. So I was given training on how to teach a problem solving for prospective secondary teachers class, which we have at HPU, and they told me somebody needs to teach it, and I was like, I don't even know what that is, but sure, I'll teach it. I'll just go learn how to do that, right? So another thing is that they gave us an online working group for a whole year, so we could ask any questions we want to the other people who are at the workshop. That was super helpful for me, is just not to feel all alone in that, because it can be scary, as an instructor going into a class without a lecture and with just a problem to give to students that they could say or do anything, right? So after the workshop, I was like super energized, and I said, okay, well, I'm not teaching problem solving yet until the spring, but I'm gonna try it in my linear algebra class. But I'm just gonna do a hybrid because I've been teaching the class for a long time. So this kind of gets to your question about the book too, I think. Like, this is just how I feel, but some people do use books. But basically, like, what I did that first time is I did an active lecture. So probably I was like lecturing half the time, and the students were practicing half the time, but they were practicing what I showed them how to do. Okay, so that was like 2 days of the week. And then on the third day, they were working on problems that I wrote to problem sets, so that was more method type stuff. So on Friday, they were presenting their solutions to the problems. So all the problems were just extensions of the ideas that we were already learning, or an introduction to a new idea. So it should be only stuff that they could handle. They told me like, oh, it's so much work, oh my gosh, the homework is killing me, like every Friday, So I kind of realized, oh yeah, when they're figuring out something new instead of just doing what I showed them, it is more work for them. So it's not really fair to give them so many problems compared to the amount of homework I would give them on something else, like where I already asked them to mimic, And the other thing is, this is what I'm saying about if there is a resource, some students will use it. Students are busy, and they're going to figure out a way to get it done, right? So it's kind of like, if I'm going to give you the answer on Monday and Wednesday, then Friday comes along, some students are like, I'll just wait till Monday, like, where I get the answer again. So I think hybrid IBL can be an easy way to start transitioning into teaching that way, but I don't really think it works. I think you have to go all in. Yeah, so then when the next semester was able to teach the problem solving for a math teaching class, I went all in. There were 11 students, math ed majors, so they're already interested in math, 3,000 level math class, 3,000 level pre-reg. They're pretty good at math, and the best thing about that class is it's not a math content class. It's problem solving for prospective teachers. So basically, I can just give them whatever problems I want, and if at the end of the semester we didn't solve all of them, it's like, oh well, nobody cares. It's not like, oh, you didn't do all the calculus. That's really bad. Like, so there's no content issues in the class. So yeah, every class was either problem solving in groups, presenting solutions to the group problems or to individual problems which they were given, discussing reading or watching videos. So I modified the materials that I received at the workshop. It wasn't a perfect class. I made a lot of mistakes, which I'll talk to you about, but I just was like, wow, this is so much better than the lecture. I couldn't even imagine teaching a problem-solving class by lecturing. Like, watch me solve a lot of problems and suddenly you'll be good at solving problems. Like, does that make sense to you? I don't think so. So here's like some of the stuff I learned, right? So 8 homework assignments is a lot for students when they have to do all the thinking themselves. So basically it's like kind of like, I think that it takes longer, but they get so much more out of it that you can do less. That's kind of like in response, I guess, to all of that stuff is that maybe like it's just a lot more bang for your buck. So you can't be giving them work all the time, but they don't really need that much work. Of course, they'll still say that I give a lot of work, but also for me, it was really difficult and time consuming, and then sometimes like, I don't think the students really thought that, but you're kind of scared that the students will say, but she just like stands there and doesn't do anything, and like we're having to do all the work, so like she's so lazy, what's wrong with her for teaching this way? And you're like, I am working my butt off behind the scenes for this to go smoothly. So it is a lot of work the first time you do it, and like if you have a class in the bag as a lecture class, you have to give that up and just say, okay, like fine, I'm going to do it all over from the beginning, and you have to just be willing to do that. Some issues that I have never faced before, like the lecture is silent, right? The students are not talking to each other. If you put them in groups and ask them to work on a problem, they can behave in certain ways that you're not prepared to deal with. So I would definitely have to, learn to deal with group dynamics. And you really give up a lot of control. It's a weird feeling. Like you have no control over what the students might ask you, how long it might take them to solve it, what method they might use to solve it. You even kind of lose control over what you say, because it's not like, with the lecture I have complete control, right? I can say exactly what I want, I can make it take exactly how long I want, I can cover exactly what I want, but as soon as everything is in your hands, like, you're gonna tell me something and then I have to react to you. It's not like I get to say, whatever I want. So you really like give up a lot of control. Although I think that, having that chaos can be a beautiful thing, and you just have to get used to giving up that control. So in terms of some things that I wish I had done differently, my time management was horrible. I think I got through like less than 2/3 of my syllabus. So you cannot plan to do as much stuff. And you have to be really clear about the grading. So I think I was grading the students fairly, but they didn't really understand that. So like the participation is going to be like 20% of the grade. You guys could imagine, like, do you like it when participation is a big part of your grade? No. Well, what if I said, okay, so this is what you have to do to earn participation points exactly. This is like how you earn them. Here's the rubric. Like if you do a presentation, I'm going to grade you on this rubric. 10, your presentation is perfect. 9, well, the proof is right, but you turned your back to the board or whatever. So like I had to work. As a math teacher, I'm just used to teaching and grading tests and only tests. So figuring out how to like give participation points, I was just kind of like, I know that like you participate a lot and she like comes late to class all the time or whatever, but no, that's not enough. You have to really let the students know that. And then I had to like change the students' groups all the time. So now I kind of figured out how to do that. But yeah, you got to assign their groups and you have to change them regularly. And you have to at least encourage all students to participate, because like the way it is, some students are always raising their hand and some students are quiet, but they still have something to say, right? So you want to try to at least even that out a little bit. And I think that it's important to explain to the students why you're teaching the class the way you are, so that they can understand, because it's different for them and they might feel uncomfortable at first, or they might say, you're not teaching me because you're not lecturing, right? So that was what I did wrong, and then here's like some stuff that I did right. I think letting students work together, so in the Moore method, like having people not talk to each other, that doesn't work for me. And in the real world, like I work with people all the time, right? Like I'm working with Dr. Amr and we just met each other like a few weeks ago. Okay, that's interesting, right? Like that happens like organically. I mean, so I think you should have to work in groups. And I always do like what I did. So anybody know they have the wrong answer? I'd love to see that mistake. I love mistakes. I let students know that, and so that they know like it's okay if I didn't do it right. We're just gonna like have a starting point, and from there, we can get to the right answer. And by the way, did you guys know that when you make a mistake, your brain actually grows? Yeah. So I was reading. Have you seen like that Joe Bowler stuff? Yeah, so they actually like did research. I guess that's even like maybe borderline psychology stuff. She said like, math teachers believe that it's only when you make a mistake and then learn from it that your brain actually grows, but that's not true. Just making the mistake is one pathway, and then learning from it is another pathway. So yeah.
My brain should be huge.
That's right.
Think about how many mistakes we've all made, right? Like, it's like I think whenever you're doing the PhD, you're like, oh, I'm right about 1% of the time, right? I think we all were very comfortable, like all of your professors are very comfortable being wrong, and like, you know, we have no idea what we're doing a lot of the time, and we're just okay with that, right? So, you know, for students in math, did you guys ever feel like ashamed to be wrong in a math class? Yes, right? That's a normal feeling. So I think that if you didn't have to feel that way, would you possibly like math more? Yeah? I just like tell the students that I like mistakes. I call on students to present wrong answers. Okay, so even if you don't volunteer, I'll usually walk around in the class and look on your paper. Oh, she has an interesting idea, but it's wrong. Could you tell what you did? Okay, so what do you think? Okay, yeah, so, okay, it's not right, but how can we make it right, you know? Yeah.
But do you think that that gets rid of it just for you, or like the students too? Because like if you, in that position, I think that that would make me extremely uncomfortable.
At first it's uncomfortable, but I think over time you get used to it, yeah. So I would say most of the classes I've taught have been very successful, and the students like know that they're allowed to be wrong, and they actually like will present their work and they'll be like, I got up until here, then I didn't know what to do. Or they'll like be like, at first I tried this, it didn't work. You know, so just like hearing students say things like that lets me know that they're not afraid of making a mistake. And I think also like because they do a lot of group work, if I'm like, what did the 3 of you guys think? And it's like, not just you that's wrong, but it's like all of you were thinking this, like, and there is something that's, like, no matter what you're thinking, there's something right in there, you know? So I think that if that's kind of like honored and like brought up, you know, like to, okay, we're just working towards a solution, but the solution isn't the be all and the end all, right? It's a process. So I think that it worked, okay? I think it did, except for like in one class where it didn't really, and then I was like, kind of, oh, I had to think about how to do better on that, yeah? So you can kind of tell when it's working and when it's not, yeah. But I think I did that pretty well, and like also just kind of like acknowledging the need for differentiation. Like different students are in different places, and different students are good at different things, and so if I can leverage that in my instruction, I think that makes it better too. And like one of the ways you can do that is like selecting problems that they have different ways to solve, and sort of problems that like everybody can have a way in to start working on the problem, and like maybe your solution will only be like this, but maybe you'll like prove something really sophisticated, so that way like everybody can keep working for a while, right, regardless of where you are at. And then also I think just like highlighting different approaches to the problem, like, oh, you solved it algebraically, like you solved it with a table, you solved it with a graph, like let's see all of the different ways. Like once we have one answer, we're not done talking about it, like, you know. Also, I give them so much time to work on the problems. Like sometimes we do one problem in the entire week. So it's kind of like, you're not just going to get the answer in 5 minutes, like it's not possible, yeah. So I think that kind of like answers that other question as well. And like students have to reflect a lot on the process. So even if they tried to go to the board and show a perfect answer, then I would ask, did you get that the first time? Oh, you didn't? Oh, what did you do before that? You know, so they kind of have to admit like all of their steps. So yeah, so when I taught problem solving again, I think it was even better, like I was able to fix a lot of the mistakes that I made. So from there, I was like, okay, let's do this again. So I'm going to tackle abstract algebra, which is one of those classes that the students say, it's so abstract. Like even for math majors, it's like too math. Okay? Which like is my area of study. I love it, but you know, it's like so frustrating for me to see them. I actually had students cheating in that class because they couldn't get it. Like whenever I was teaching it traditionally, it was like my most depressing class to teach. So I was like, forget that noise, let's do this with the modified form method. Like that's just crazy, but you know, let's do it anyway. So I did. Thankfully, I had 5 students in the class, which I think helped, and they were 5 little angels, and they loved the more method so much. So we did do some group work in class, but mostly they were doing presentations of individual proofs, and a lot of proofs would be started by somebody who didn't know how to finish it, and then they would either go back to their groups to work from the idea. I think because it was hard, it almost was like, nobody's going to get this like the first time, but if you work on it, like we're going to be able to go from there. So yeah, it was amazing, the class, like just, they did so well. I didn't cover nearly as much material, I'll admit it, but I mean, maybe it doesn't matter. Sandra Larson said it doesn't matter. We don't have abstract 2, so I wasn't too worried about it. So then after that, I taught a graduate class in the education department, so like teaching the future teachers, so about math curriculum and instruction. And it was interesting because I didn't know how to teach it. I've never taken an education class. I like had no idea what I was doing. But I ended up teaching with IBL without even meaning to, because it was kind of like the most natural thing. So pretty much it was 11 students. They did have a textbook, okay, which was very important to the class, but they weren't learning any new content. It was more like talking about teaching and stuff like that. So they would read a chapter in the textbook, which might be like, I don't know, here's how you teach algebra or whatever, right? And so each week, like a different student would present the textbook, they would lead the discussion, they were working on math problem sets, because part of what they're supposed to do is review to teach math, so they're like very motivated to figure it all out on their own, right? And they ask a lot of questions. And then they would be writing lesson plans, and they would work together in their groups to do the lesson plan. So it was almost like all I had to do was just give them the work, and then every time they came to the class, then they just like took total responsibility. So that was pretty awesome. So then I said, oh, I'm good at teaching IPL. Like I should be really ambitious and do it more. So then last semester, I decided to use it in 2 new classes. So linear algebra again. So this is like the core math class that all math majors have to take, so it's very important. I had a lot of pressure on the coverage issue, but I modeled it kind of off the abstract class. So it was like half modified Moore method, and then half of the time they were working on investigations, like discovery-based stuff during class time in their small groups. So this is a class that I don't think I did as good, so some of the students really struggled with the lack of outside resources. So I actually, you know, I had to think about it, and you know, it's kind of like, they were just like, all you give us is this paper, and then we're like supposed to solve the problem, and it's like, yeah, you are. But they were just like, what the hell is going on here? And then it was a little bit larger class, like 18, that doesn't sound that big, but compared to my 5 and my 11, it was bigger. Like you can imagine, like there's kind of a difference when there starts to be like that many students in the class. And then this is the class I was telling you about. They were kind of reluctant to present their mistakes. Like I tried everything, but I don't think that they ever fully overcame, like they didn't want to go in front of 18 students and be wrong. Right? So like towards the end of the class, I started doing more everything in groups instead of individually. But yeah, so that was kind of a struggle. I think the class was still a success overall. During that same semester, I was also teaching proofwriting. So this is my first 2000 level class. As you see, I was kind of like starting up there and then moving like down. It gets harder and harder at the lower levels. So this one I used an IBL textbook. So the only thing they're allowed to read is that book. They're not allowed to go online, they're not allowed to read anything else, but they're allowed to read the book. So basically, instead of just having only definitions, it has like a little bit of explanation. Like a little bit. Because it's only a 2000 level class. So they were a pretty small class, I think it was like 7 students, but they were totally different than my abstract algebra class. Like, just the way they acted, like the way that they studied, you know, I was like, oh, I can't like expect this to go the way that it went before. So, I mean, like, duh, I guess, but I was kind of surprised. So I started to learn now that I'm like getting a little bit more intermediate, each kind of math, each group of students, even if I teach the same class again, it's going to be completely different. So they have their own needs, right? So I have to figure out what their needs are. So like one thing is, like, if you want to transition to teaching like this, you just need to know that it's a process, it takes time, and it takes a lot of reflection on yourself. And like, you know, I had to like have the ability to say, you know, I didn't do a good job, like I need to do better, you know. But I mean, hey, like if I just do a perfect lecture every time and I'm like, I'm so smart, like I know math so good, those students are going to know math now just by watching me, like that's not very reflective, right? That's not like a very good way, I think. So the reason why I was able to move ahead is because I focused on my goals, I was patient, just like what I expect my students to do. I made my mistakes and I learned from them. And I took a lot of opportunities. So like whenever I had an opportunity to do anything IBL-ish, I just said yes. That's kind of how I act towards everything. But yeah, so this semester my accomplishment is I'm actually teaching Calc 1, which is like my lowest class yet, to 18 students with IBL. So that's pretty awesome, I think, because calculus has like so much material to cover, and I pretty much covered almost all of it. So it seems like it's a little harder to do in the lower classes because, like, especially in the Calc 1 class, most of the students are bio majors. They're not that into math. So what do? I give them a lot of problems about drug dosing and bacteria populations and stuff like that, right? I got to know the students and what they need, and then I can just ask them questions that they're interested in. And the coverage issue, I have like a panic attack every other week about how behind I am on the schedule. And then I just throw something out and I deal with it and I move on. So yeah. Also in the Calc 1 class, I let them have textbook, open internet, anything they want. So I think that, you know, linear algebra was borderline. Calc 1 is never going to fly if I ask them to do that. But still, the students pretty much like invent calculus by themselves in the classroom. Like I just came from the class and I was like, it's amazing. Like just they're so smart. Like everything that they can think of. I don't know why we don't trust students more. Like in a way, you know. So I think that IBL is kind of nice because you trust yourself as an instructor to be smart enough to respond to whatever students do. in the class and like manage time on the fly, and then you trust students to be smart enough to actually do math in an authentic way, right? So what could go wrong with that? So yeah, like I said, in that class, the students aren't really like, there's no more method. It's all discovery based. Their homework is like more or less routine problems, but still in the class, I pretty much don't lecture. They just work on investigations, and the students are presenting the solutions. And the students ask a lot of questions. So too bad none of the students are here today. I could ask them if they agree with me, but I think so. So yeah, so in the fall, I'm going to teach all my classes with IBL, but it's all repeat classes. Although I already have like 30 students in 2 of them, so I'm like super panicked about that, but that's okay. That's just like another obstacle for me. So for that linear algebra class, I might let them have a textbook. I didn't decide yet, but I might. I might, and then just encourage them not to read it. And I might do like 5 minutes of examples a day or something like that, just because they really struggled a lot. It might have been too hard, you know. Yeah, so kind of all my lessons, I'm going to try to do more group work if the students need it. Like I have to always work on my timing, my class size. But I really don't want to go back to lecture in any of the classes where I tried IBL. I have no desire whatsoever to do that. So, yeah, so let me briefly like talk about, I know we're getting close, but the student experience. So I think like one thing is, like about math, have you guys heard of growth mindset? Fixed mindset? Okay. So there's kind of an idea that like, there's like 2 kind of mindsets about math. One is, there's people who are good at math, and then there's people who aren't good at math. And I'm one or I'm the other, right? So that's like a fixed mindset. And then there's another mindset which says math is a skill, and everybody is going to get better at math if they work hard, right? So I think that like some students just honestly think they're not math people, and that might not be their fault. They might have been told that and made to feel that way, but that's really not true. And students who actually believe that they can get better at math with hard work do better in math. And I think that if they're taught that way, they can kind of develop that kind of feeling about themselves. So like I said, struggle and failure are not bad things. Like actually the students like have to do a presentation twice a semester about a failure that they had and how it was productive for them. That's another way where we like to talk about mistakes. So productive failure is a good thing. I think they understand the material better. I think the course evals are pretty good. I'll share some of the quotes with you, although I had 2 students who hated me in the linear algebra class, one of whom actually had the guts to tell me. And I tried to work with her and I offered solutions, and then I think she just didn't want any of them. She didn't want anything to do with it. And then the other one, I had no idea. She was sitting there smiling the whole time, and then she ripped into me. But other than that, in all those other classes, it's only been like 5s across the board, so mostly they like it. A couple people will hate you, but like I can handle that, I guess, you know, it might be still worth it. I think the positive outweighs the negative, and I think the student confidence is just worth it. For me, like if a couple students don't like it, then like I think that the gains of the others is actually more worthwhile. I also think, yeah, so that's like what I was thinking about during your talk. So like the things that I think IBL can give a student, teamwork skills, like you're expected to have that skill when you go into the workplace, right? So Dr. Armour was talking about these things. Oral communication and listening, yes, everyday presentations in class. That's going to help with your oral communication, right? Critiquing and constructing arguments, students are responsible for doing that. I don't tell them. I think that builds critical thinking. Maybe I should put in like air quotes because I'm not really sure if it's like really critical thinking, but at least like, is this proof right or wrong? You know, sense making and problem solving skills can be transferred to the workplace. So like Dr. Crawford was talking about the interview process at Google, and like pretty much like they might be like, here's a problem, how would you solve it? And I think my students would be comfortable saying, I don't know how to solve it, but here's what I might try to do. You know, it's kind of like having like all of those experiences working on problems like can kind of make you better at problem solving. Students can have more confidence, and they're like used to talking about math in a meaningful way. So it's not like you're just sitting there passively listening all the time, but you're actually like talking about it and doing it yourself. So then if you have to talk about it, you'll be able to do that. So here's like the student evals. I feel kind of embarrassed to show them, but I think it's kind of worth it just because they're not saying like, the instructor is great, she's smart. It's not about me. It's not about me. It's about them and how they feel about themselves. So they feel like if they would do this from elementary school on, the nation's math performance would be better. I don't think anybody's going to write that about a lecture, right? I felt like I actually taught myself most of the material, which is awesome. Like I liked how I used my own brain for the whole class, and I didn't need a book or the internet to figure anything out. So these are people who liked having no book and no internet. I see that lecture is not the only way to teach students. Let students develop their own math skills and solve the problems without telling them what strategies they need. Like, this is how they feel, you know? It's pretty good. The class helped a lot with my presenting skills. And the class helped me understand why and how math rules exist, and just better understand math in general. Like, completely changed the way I approach learning. So instead of computing, I feel like I truly understand math concepts. I don't have anything memorized, I just understand it. It can be so frustrating, but it's worth it, right? So like they have to kind of like feel the frustration, but hopefully they feel it's worth it. One more student thought inquiry-based nature was interesting and beneficial. They enjoyed discovering how to work problems on their own without the professor laying it out before they tried it. So you can see, like, if anything they say about me, it's what I didn't do. I didn't let them have a book. I didn't tell them how to solve the problem. I didn't lay it out for them. And they like it. Like, these are what they all look like. This is not just like me cherry picking. This is just kind of how students feel at the end of the class. So yeah, like my experience, like I said, I really had to adjust to giving up control. I'm like totally anal and I'm a control freak, but I just embrace the chaos in the classroom now. Takes a lot more time to plan initially, so if you do want to do that, you have to like have some workload up front. You have to be ready to make a lot of decisions in the moment. Coverage is an issue, but maybe it doesn't matter. So yeah, it takes time and reflection. I think it's super worth it. Honestly, like I am teaching a lecture class right now because I'm teaching it for the first time. I'm not ready to teach it with IBL. I don't even really know what it is. So it's like an active lecture. Like half the time I tell them what to do, half the time they practice. I just feel like kind of sad inside when I'm teaching the class. Like I just don't feel as good about it, you know, because it's all about student thinking and like, you know, I don't really feel that the students are getting to live up to their potential. But there's a lot of resources out there for math, and if anybody's interested in talking about it, any instructors want to try it, like I'd be happy to talk to you and help you. And I think, I don't really do it much, but I think it's a good opportunity like to do math ed research or psych ed research, like because you get such a good insight into student thinking and you can get a lot of evidence about student thinking by doing that. So these are all the resources mostly for math, but there's workshops, conferences, small grants. So I got a small grant the first time I taught the class, so I got a course release to do it. Yeah, the books online, which I shared with you. There's a lot of resources online. The Times Project, I participated in that project. So in my linear class, I got curricular materials, I got a TA, and in return, I had to like give them data on student thinking. I mean, it was a really good deal for me. So they have that for linear, abstract, differential equations, the IBL Calculus website. I've been modifying their stuff. So steal, don't do it all by yourself. And then my mentor Stan has a blog that I think is really good too. So yeah, there's a lot of cool resources out there. And that's all I have. So thank you guys, very much.
Thank you. Hey, comments, reactions.
Well, I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
So, how was attendance? Because I know with like lectures, it's a lot easier for students to skip out.
Attendance is required,
Oh.
so they all know. That's like, I just tell the students like, here's what I need from you. Like if I'm gonna have you like being in a group and your group isn't there, like the class is just not gonna function. So if they don't come to the class, then it lowers their grade. Which is kind of high school, but it's what I have to do. Yeah, good question.
You know, in the exercise you gave us in the beginning, right? Handshaking, and how many permutations of that, you know? So Brit to me, Brit to Phillips, Brit to Lawson, and then me to Phillips, and so on. So how would that have gone? We were talking, exchanging some ideas, so we would have spent the class until we came up with the answer.
It would have been, you would have been like assigned groups to work into.
Okay.
Yeah, so you would work on it, and then I would like visit you if you're stuck. I would help you, and then I would look at how you're doing it. There's like actually like several different ways to solve the problem.
Okay.
So I would be hoping that different groups would solve it different ways, and then
alrighty.
yeah, depending on what happened, I would start to call people up to share their ideas. And
Okay.
if they were all stuck, we'd kind of like work through it. And
Okay, and you know, just really applying it to that particular exercise, right? Now you said the IBL is particularly suited for math because math there is one correct answer. It's not
I don't
like
think that means it's suited for math. Actually, like the education class was way easier to teach. I think the thing that is hard about math is that there's one right answer. So
Okay.
then it's like tempting to just give the answer.
Okay.
But I think that IBL like is very like, in a way it's kind of like, what? We don't have to tell them anything? They can figure everything else out on their own? Like that's crazy. Like I think it is kind of like less intuitive to do it for math, whereas if it's like psychology, like, well, what do you think? Like, what's your experience? Like, you have something to build on already. Like, I think that if I could teach another subject, I would also do IBL.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think it's just that math, you know, lecture doesn't really work.
So with this, if we came up with an answer, like how many permutations, and we came up with an answer of like, let's say 120 or something like that, then you as the instructor, you would tell us,
So if it was wrong, like let's say 120 is wrong, then I might say, well then like, okay, if everybody was like completely on board with that, then I might say, okay, so let's check our work and see if it worked with 4 people.
oh, okay, gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
So
okay.
there's different strategies too, like if you were stuck, I might ask you to start if there was only 4 people and then work your way up from there, right? But yeah, I wouldn't say 120 is wrong. I would say, okay, we have a conjecture, and I would like write it up, and then I would say, let's see if it works for n equals 4 as well. And then
okay.
you might be like, oh, it doesn't work. Okay, we need to go back and try to figure out what happened,
Interesting, interesting.
Catherine, did you have a question?
I just wanted to state that I think it's really, I kind of resonate with a lot of your comments with the teacher evaluations, because I really do think this is sort of the way to teach a lot of subjects, especially math, though, because I feel like math, especially in our country, gets treated like such a horrific thing. I get so many students who just loathe math.
Right.
Just loathe it. And I'm not really sure where that comes from. And then I realize, like, there's almost anxiety, but if they actually have that experience of discovering math themselves and realizing it's something that they can too discover,
Yeah.
I think it's so empowering. So I really appreciate that you go over this.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, because it's not math's fault. It's kind of like the
No.
way it's been taught, and it's like this idea that math is like computing this thing and getting the right answer. That's pointless.
And the answer is always the big emphasis
Right.
in a lot of math. That if the answer, the answer, the answer. But in reality, it's the process. So it's,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Other comments, reactions? I'll tell you, I listened to Dr. Amr's presentation, and then afterwards this morning I'm thinking, wow, maybe I got to give 20-page papers. And then
I was like, no, they shouldn't read it. I'm not like against reading.
Just going half shaking her head, no, Tsushima. That's not the takeaway, Tsushima. And then I listen to you, I'm all, hey, who needs a textbook? Just give them a problem. Very interesting. Well, if there are no other go ahead.
I just want to add on what you were saying, though, because I think what Dr. Anderson brought up earlier during the lecture is that there is actually, I think, specific types of critical thinking depending on the genre or the subject. And I don't think, the right answer is just give all these people things to read and all these things to write. But I do think people do need opportunities to practice writing and practice solving problems. And I don't think we give to students in the classroom. I think using the classroom to actually kind of do all the homework will actually enable them to actually do it on their own later. I think that's, I don't know, that's what I'm sort of getting from both of our lectures.
Yeah, no, ditto, I was even toying with the idea, gee, if it's 20-page paper, maybe we do some of the writing together,
Yeah,
There's always this kind of presumption, we'll do the lecture in class, and then you do the writing and you turn it in to me at the end of the term. Well, why not do it together,
Yeah, it's just like, what's the best use of the time? Like, if students are actively working in class, then at least you use the time in a valuable way.
Yes, absolutely working, and wow. I'm going to see some enrollments in my classes dip down. Hi, man. With that, if there are no other comments, let's hear it again for Dr. Very good. Thank you so much. Thank you. Excellent.